Question then, Ollie. Is City letting Kyle Walker go in January a mistake? Yes or no?
No.
Okay,
I
proceed.
think I think it would have been a mistake if we were just getting rid of him and there was no replacements coming in, or if there was no other kind of bodies coming into the squad. But the fact is, if we're bringing in two young centre backs potentially with Abdul Kusanov and Vitor Rice, I think it is. Two guys I've never watched play before. I'm not going to pretend I'm experts on them. I'm sure there are people who will come on this podcast and speak about them at length who will have actually gone and watched the footage. I haven't. I've watched a few compilations of both of them. But I think the fact is, in a purely numbers game, City are making the right move. But when I look at it, I just think my opinions on Kyle Walker have been clear all season. It was a mistake to keep him in 2023 when Bayern Munich came in for him.
That's aged really badly, hasn't it? That decision has aged really badly.
And the thing is, you can understand why Pep Guardiola was so keen to keep him with the amount of experience he was letting go from the squad that year. But at the same time, I just think you let the wrong people go. I think, for example, if City had kept Ilkay Gundogan for another year, and they're giving him a 1 year deal, basically the same deal they've given him this season, that 1+1 option, the option to extend triggers after a certain amount of appearances, that would have been absolutely fine. And then they let Kyle Walker go instead. I think that would have been absolutely fine for Manchester City. But I just think, it's weird because letting him go in January it's always strange to let a player with that much experience walk out the door. But at the same time, I don't think he's had a good game this season. He's not been the sole fault for Manchester City's woes this season. He hasn't. I can fully admit that. But he has been a problem this season. He was problematic last season. And even in the treble, apart from a few select games, even in that treble year, he wasn't very good for Manchester City.
Which made the decision to keep him around even weirder for me, because it wasn't like, take Gundogan for example, who was crucial in that treble victory. It wasn't like Kyle Walker was a standout. He had some really good performances, but you can't just keep a fella around for 2-3 matches a year where you might play Mbappe or you might play Vinicius Junior. And if I remember rightly, I think his minutes or his appearances or something like that in the Premier League doubled last season compared to the season before. It must have been the minutes, because appearances would have been pretty similar. So for me, that was a mistake at the time. And when I asked the question, is it a mistake for them to let him go in January? I don't think it necessarily is, because like you say, it's clearly something that's run its course. I'm not quite sure about the optics of seeing the club captain, and we can sit here and debate and probably come to a fair agreement that Kyle Walker should have never been the captain in the first place. Nothing on him. Just personally, I would have given it to somebody else. However, letting the club captain leave mid-season on the back of what is, objectively Guardiola's worst run, fingers crossed, turning a corner, but the way the last couple of weeks and months have been, it's been pretty woeful. Seeing him leave in January for me is I don't know if I like the optics. Even though I agree, it's well overdue that Kyle Walker moves on.
Yeah, the optics aren't great, but I think at the same time, because he's done ask for this move, I think that says a lot about it personally. And it's not like he's asking to move and he's going to Saudi Arabia. It looks like there's serious interest from AC Milan. There's even talk of an interest of a loan deal from Real Madrid. I can't begrudge a guy who's 35 years old at the end of his career, having these options coming from his agent. Clearly,
are you surprised these options are on the table? Because I love watching Serie A, and AC Milan aren't necessarily in the strongest of form this season. However, I think they're much better than that. They're obviously still in the Champions League. They could maybe go on and make the knockout stages of that. It feels like a weird one. The Real Madrid one, I get it, because obviously Carvajal got injured, but overall, the names being bandied around, given his performances in the last couple of weeks and months, have been crazy for me.
Yeah, I mean, when I first saw the news, I thought, okay, he's going to Saudi. He's had a thing from his agent. He's been offered ridiculous money. Fair enough. He's a guy at the end of his career. He's a perfect guy for a Saudi Arabian club to pick up. And then when the news came through that it was AC Milan, I think we all kind of were shocked by that, thinking, Really? AC Milan? They want Kyle Walker in this form at
The
this
same
point?
Kyle Walker. I thought it was the media guy,
Yeah,
the
yeah.
presenter.
It would make more sense. But I can't. I don't think the club can begrudge that, regardless of the optics of him being captain or not. And there was a thing mentioned in, I can't remember if it was the Telegraph piece of the Athletic piece about it, saying that the last couple of times he's come on the pitch, he's refused to take the armband from Kevin De Bruyne. Whether that kind of has led to this moment or whatever, I'm not sure. But I just think obviously he's felt this is the right time for him. I think it is the right time for the club because it kind of it it it's a decision that was going to happen in 6 months anyway. It's everyone knew that Kyle Walker's time the club was coming to an end. I don't think there was much he would have contributed for the rest of this season. Yes, it could be a little problematic in terms of positional numbers because neither Kusanov or Vitorius are by trade right backs. It leaves Rico Lewis as the only actual right back at the club, and even then, he's more of a midfielder anyway, or he plays more like a midfielder. It leaves City in a bit of a weird position with that, but at the same time, I still just look at it and go, I actually think this is a deal where everyone comes out happy. Manchester City avoid an awkward conversation in the summer. AC Milan get a player they're interested in. Kyle Walker gets to finish his career on a bit of a higher note than, being essentially forced out of Manchester City's first team.
It will annoy me a little bit that with the pace that this is moving at, I'm trying to think when City's next home game will be because it is back to back away matches. If I remember off the top of my head, Chelsea in 2 weeks' time, I believe. It will annoy me that he doesn't get a send off because look, we ourselves have just spent the last sort of 5-10 minutes speaking about the negative sides, but let's not forget this is he will probably go down as the greatest right back in Premier League history. Certainly one of the greatest fullbacks in European football over the last 10, 15 years. He has played such an integral part to Pep's early success. I believe Adam Booker called him once upon a time the most important signing of the Pep era behind Erling Haaland. So the fact that he isn't necessarily going to get the send off, and it has soured all of the online stuff. We can't ignore it. Maybe football players should have thicker skins. I don't know, but you can understand why it would affect him. And like I said on a previous show, there was a few grumblings in the West Ham game when he sort of got on the ball, made a mistake. And look, the relationship is well and truly sort of expired and gone past its sell-by date. But I think the way it's ended for me is just a bit disappointing.
Yeah, 100%. And I don't want to sit here and criticize Kyle Walker relentlessly because we've all done enough of that this season. If he is leaving, then yeah, we should look at it. We should look at it and go, actually, this guy was brilliant for us. He was. This is a signing that's paid off time and time and time again. And just because the last 18 months, 2 years hasn't gone the way that anyone would have, one, hoped, two, expected, three, wished for, doesn't sour the fact that for the first 5, 6, 7 years of his career at Manchester City, he was probably the most important player, one of the most important players in the squad, the leader of that defense at times, the most consistent appearance maker in that defense at times, and an absolutely world-class fullback who shut down every winger he came across at least once in his career. There's that famous video going around from one of the title celebrations of Riyad Mahrez saying, who's Kyle Walker not beat one-on-one? Mbappe, Neymar, Vinicius Jr. He's shut them all down. So I really hope, because obviously he's not going to get that send-off from the Etihad. And I do think the Etihad, if he was to get it, would, cheer him and be very positive about it, because everyone kind of accepts how great Kyle Walker's been. But whatever the media team come up with for his farewell, we're going to look back at a collection of historic moments. Yes, there probably won't be much footage from the last 18 months, but we can look at those first 5, 6, 7 years and go, fucking hell, Kyle Walker was a phenomenal player for Manchester City. And that should be the main focus of, the next, week, 2 weeks, whatever it takes until this deal is done.
It is quite chastening in a way because I'm just thinking about it now. He's probably the first of the Pep era Mount Rushmore figures, you know, the guys that Pep brought in himself. We obviously had Ilkay Gundogan after the treble, but Ilkay Gundogan's back, so we'll have to sort of awkwardly redo the farewell for Gundogan. But like that, this is like, unless I'm missing something really obvious, this feels like the first major one that Pep has brought in, molded, and will now see off. Which I guess sort of speaks to how long Guardiola's been at the club. That he's going through his probably second rebuild. You could maybe even squeeze 2.5, 3 if you consider some of those sort of 2020 transfers and the the Ruben Diaz's, etc., etc. But yeah, it's that era coming to an end, and it's been bloody hell. It's been abrupt. It's still a bit like, all right, okay, but what good times we had.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, the Manchester City under Pep Guardiola has been a golden age, and near enough every single player Pep's brought into the club has had enormous success with us. And Kyle Walker was one of the first. He was that guy in 2017 who came in and was, you know, really part of that rebuild that Pep was finishing off from 2016 in terms of putting the squad back together from what he had left, from what Pellegrini and the board had left him. You know, it just makes me think of all those guys that we had in that squad at that time, you know, even including players like Danilo, you know, it makes me think of Leroy Sané, all these guys who were here for a couple of years, had enormous success with us, won a couple of titles and everything, but they didn't go on. Kyle Walker and Ilkay Gundogan and John Stones, they're probably the three of those early Pep signings that have been here the whole way through, seen it all with Pep. And, you know, the first one's gone. You know, one came back obviously in Ilkay Gundogan, and it just makes me think of God. It really is the end of an era. You know, yes,
it's only going to get worse. Bernardo Silva, Kevin De Bruyne. You know,
it's crazy. It is really crazy to think about, because when I think of Pep Guardiola's time at Manchester City, it still just feels so short. It feels like it's been a couple of years because so much has happened. You just go, bloody hell, that's all
been a decade.
Fast.
It's weird because that's such, like, obviously sort of accidental partridge here, but 10 years is a long time. And that, you know, I imagine you were the same, Ollie. I certainly was a teenager when he arrived, and, you know, now a fully fledged adult in name and nature. So yeah, it is you know, reflected on it. Not that it's over yet, and hopefully it goes on well beyond a decade. But yeah, it is a bit like
Yeah, I mean, it's just one of those moments that just kind of makes you think, bloody hell, this has been going on a really long time now. And but yeah, no, good luck to Kyle Walker. I think it's just, yes, it's overdue, yes, it's a bit delayed, but it is the right decision for everyone. I don't think anyone should be making a case that Kyle Walker should be staying at Manchester City till the summer. I just don't think there's a case out there that can really be justified. And I like the fact that he's going to Europe.
Because I can think of one.
Try.
And look, I've said this before already this season, but Kyle Walker didn't start the season as City's first choice right back, in my opinion. You think back to those early games, specifically West Ham away, which I think is probably City's best performance. They were really good that day. Rico Lewis was so fantastic from that position, and, you know, played there. Maybe because Kyle Walker was out with England and couldn't necessarily start the season in fine form and, you know, fitness, etc. I think if Kyle Walker, without the injuries, if Kyle Walker was used properly this season, it looks a lot like him starting on the bench and being used as a squad player as opposed to starting 11. So I agree. The fact City are bringing in players makes the him being able to go acceptable. If they hadn't, I think you would have, in my opinion, been making a mistake by letting him go. Look, that's all hypothetical. But I think if you wanted Kyle Walker to be useful this season, it would have been as a bit part player. Whether or not he wants that, I don't know.
Yeah, and I think that maybe that's contributed to why he's wanted to go at this point, you know, because he knows he's only going to be a bit part player from here on out. You know, he's played relatively sparingly. Yes, he's had a couple of runs of consecutive starts, but I think it's fair to say that Rico Lewis has been the first choice right back this season, and rightfully so for me. Everyone knows I'm a huge Rico Lewis fan, and yes, Rico's not had a perfect season up to this point. You know, he's played a ridiculous amount of football that, of course, is going to slow him down at certain points. But Yeah, I think maybe that's contributed to as to why. It's going to be really interesting to see what City do in response to this. In terms of do they go out and buy a proper right back? Do they go out and find someone on like? Do they go and find like their own kind of Kyle Walker, AC Milan's Kyle Walker type deal, where they just try and get someone in till the summer or whatever? I'm not sure, but I just think I just can't escape the fact that I think this is just a good time for everyone to kind of say, okay, it's the right moment. And as I said, the fact is he's going to another club in Europe, he's not going for a Saudi payday or whatever, makes it a bit more easier to kind of understand from his perspective, because he's trying to get another experience at the end of his career, and what a career it has been for him.
That was the first part of the show. If you want more, make sure to check the City Ramble wherever you get your podcasts from.